Good morning and welcome to the webinar Invoice Fraud Prevention, How to Protect Your Organisation. My name is Steven MacDonald. I'm a pre-sales consultant for m-hance and I'll be acting as the moderator for today's presentation. I'm joined by Rob Anderson, who's a partner account manager at SAP Concur. m-hance have partnered with SAP Concur for many years and they've got world-leading solutions for integrated travel, expense and invoice management, of which many of our clients are integrating into their dynamic solutions. Before I hand over to Rob, I just want to review a few housekeeping items. We expect the webinar to last approximately 45 minutes. Please note the webinar is being recorded and will be available to review on demand afterwards. All participants are set to listen only and will remain so during the webinar. If you have a question, click on the question button to the right hand side of your GoToMeeting screen. In the new pane that opens, you can type the question and at the top box, click Ask. Do feel free to submit questions at any point. Depending on the time constraints, we might have to answer them at the end or offline after the webinar. With that, I'd like to hand over to our presenter, Rob.
Thank you very much, Steve. Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for joining and taking time out to join the webinar this morning. As Steve mentioned, my name is Rob Anderson. I'm a partner account manager at SAP Concur. I manage a relationship with m-hance, who we've been working with for a number of years, as Steve mentioned. I should just say, m-hance are well versed and very experienced with SAP Concur and we worked on a number of projects and implementations together. So should you be interested in sort of looking further into SAP Concur, you should rest assured that you're in very good hands with m-hance as well. So again, as Steve mentioned, we'll have time at the end for questions. I'll do my best to answer them today. I should say I'm not very technical, so if they are more of a technical nature, I'll of course take them offline and come back to you. But if we go ahead and get started, so as you can see and as you know, the topic today is around invoice fraud prevention, so how you can really protect your organisation and get visibility up front into that. So, we're living in very interesting times. We're still waiting to find out what Brexit's going to actually look like and what impacts it's going to have on the economy. We have ever-changing foreign relations between nations and, of course, world leaders. Who would have thought that President Trump would be meeting Kim Jong-un this year? We also had recent introduction of GDPR and how this affects the way companies market to consumers. So if anything is certain, it's uncertainty. And that's left many UK businesses wondering about the impact it's going to have on them and what it means for their financial performance. So some questions that you may be wondering are your current systems and processes set up for change and are they future-proof? What can you do to protect your cash flow? And how do you free up capital for strategic initiatives? And finally, how can you help improve productivity and drive engagement across the workforce? I'd like to start by talking about how big the topic of invoice fraud is in the UK. It came out in the media recently, which you may have seen, that according to a survey by banking trade body UK Finance, more than 4 in 10 businesses in the UK are unaware of the risks posed by invoice fraud, and that is despite such scams costing firms £93 million in 2018. As you'll know, scams take place when fraudsters trick firms into transferring money by posing as legitimate payees. There were 3,280 invoice and bank mandate scam cases involving businesses over the year, with an average loss per case of more than £28,000. Some £29.6 million of the money lost to this type of fraud was fortunately returned to business customers, the trade body says. UK Finance surveyed 1,500 firms across the UK and found that 55% of sole traders were aware of the threat of invoice fraud, compared with 68% of small businesses and 84% of large businesses. Large businesses were more likely to have taken steps to protect themselves against such scams, but they're also more likely to have experienced invoice fraud than smaller firms. Manual processes make it much harder for you to track company spending, that's a fact, increasing cash flow uncertainty, unseen fraud, and risk of non-compliance. 53% of UK SMBs say that manual processes resulted in a lack of visibility into cash flow, increasing the likelihood of accounting teams missing fraud or unqualified spending. 44% of UK SMBs say that tax and compliance issues were a top pain point, and compliance is becoming harder to manage them with changing tax and regulatory requirements. For example, properly reporting VAT for employees travelling abroad. 42% of UK SMBs cited submission and approval of non-qualified expenses and invoices, and this is a form of misspending that can easily be missed when using manual processes. And finally, 36% of UK SMBs specifically pointed to fraud and or risk management as a major challenge of managing spend manually. Now, if you're asking yourself if fraud is truly an issue to be concerned with in your organisation, the answer is a resounding yes. Fraud exists within every organisation of every size, of every industry and in every location, and it is a true enterprise risk. Not all fraud is detected or reported, and if you're only banking on detection strategies to catch fraudulent activity, you will already lost the fight. If the money is gone, you'll most likely not recover it, and if you do get the money back, you'll have spent a lot of resources in doing so. Fraud also creates numerous detrimental effects on an organisation outside of monetary loss, such as loss of reputation and legal ramifications. The bottom line is everyone is at risk of fraud, and if you're not leveraging the right technology to prevent and monitor fraud, you are losing money. The perpetrator of fraud might surprise you. Your most trusted and tenured employees typically know where all the holes in your systems are, although it does not immediately correlate to fraudulent intention. If you don't have effective anti-fraud controls put into place, you might be putting your organisation at risk. The vast majority of fraud perpetrators are first-time offenders, and according to Oversight's third annual spend analysis report, you might assume you're only losing a few pounds here and there from invoice fraud instances. If you have multiple instances of fraud within a year, that absolutely adds up to more than a few pounds. Often uncovering a red flag of fraud in invoice spending can actually be the thread that unravels an entire fraud scheme impacting an organisation. All this may leave you thinking, what kind of red flags should I be looking out for when it comes to invoice and even travel and expense fraud as well? If we look at the more global outlook, the term bribery often conjures up thoughts of large sums of money being used to sway powerful officials one way or another. But when it comes to the rules and regulations set forth by the UK Bribery Act, the terms bribery and government officials or foreign public officials apply to a wide spectrum of actions and personnel. So how can this organisation ensure they're not unintentionally breaking any rules and putting their business at risk of a regulatory related audit? In today's fast-paced business world, having a more global presence is essential to stay competitive, but that leaves you exposed to more regulatory risks and fraud opportunities. So how can your organisation navigate this ambiguity, especially as you grow and expand globally and domestically? So the first point here is understanding your business network. The first step is in protecting against the inadvertent bribery of a government official is ensuring that employees engaging in cross-border business dealings have a firm understanding of all points of contact they'll be directly or indirectly working with. In turn, leaders need to take a step back and consider how the organisation works with various points of contact during the business process so they can see more easily identify situations that may put them at risk of a violation. The second point, implementing the appropriate controls. The knowledge and expertise of your organisation's finance and compliance team is imperative to successfully mitigating UK Bribery Act risk. Configuring invoice systems with the appropriate workflows, spend categories, conditional and custom fields, and requiring manager approvals or anything of value is purchased are key to catching potential fraud violations before they occur. Having these types of checks and balances in place also creates an audit trail with documentation that proves your organisation is doing your due diligence to prevent instances of bribery. The third point is maintaining clear and correct records. So when it comes to your financial books and records, you must maintain reasonable detail that accurately and fairly reflects transactions surrounding foreign officials. Anything that is falsely representing or misleading can lead to an enforcement action. In addition, internal controls must be in place, meaning you must be able to provide reasonable assurance that the transactions are properly authorised, recorded and accounted for. The fourth point, implementing a comprehensive audit process. While these provisions are broad, creating an internal system that includes effective oversight and reporting capabilities will help maintain Bribery Act compliance. Build an audit process that has rules to account for regulatory violations. And you may want to consider the following approaches. So audit receipt types and itemizations, audit cash expenses, conduct random checks, identify location and type of expense and where, verify employment and look for behavior patterns, and use a third-party auditor to maintain credibility. And the fifth point is education around clear policies. While preventative measures and audits are essential, don't underestimate the importance of proactive education. Ensure your finance team is properly trained and has a firm understanding of what constitutes both bribery and foreign officials. In addition, build clear, easy to understand organisation-wide policies around what is and is not permitted when it comes to working with foreign officials to ensure everyone is on the same page and maintains compliance. And the final point here is knowledge is key. Maintaining Bribery Act compliance boils down to having the proper knowledge surrounding what is considered bribery to a foreign official and building the appropriate policies to combat that. Ensure you have the right knowledge, systems and tools in place to give your finance team and organisations what they need to be successful in reducing these risks. If we look at some of the sneaky tricks that fraudsters may be doing. So imagine an invoice lands on your desk. Let's say it's for some printer cartridges. It's a bit strange because it isn't from the local printer company that you usually work with, but you don't really give it a thought. Perhaps the cartridges need to be sourced elsewhere for some reason this time. You know, you're busy, it isn't worth worrying about, and you pass it on for payment to the accounts payable team. Or you should stop there because while it might be an innocent invoice, it also might not be. You know, are you sure that those printer cartridges were actually ordered from a genuine supplier and actually arrived in your office? Of course, you want to avoid non-payment of a legitimate invoice, but finance teams also need to be wary of fraudulent invoices. Invoice fraud is on the rise and rapidly so. A lot of people are suggesting the UK small and medium-sized businesses lose more than £9 billion to invoice fraud every year, and that's the equivalent to £1,658 per SMB. And if you think you wouldn't be fooled by the printer cartridge scam scenario, could you be sure about any of these, the following? So the first one is a fake directory listing. You know, you receive an email or a phone call purporting to be someone wanted to feature from your company detail in a directory. The directory might be a familiar name, it might not be. Either way, they've got a compelling offer that directly will go to huge numbers of people or to your perfect target market. Taking the space seems a no-brainer, so you do. The hefty invoice arrives and you duly pay it, but the directory or your listing in it simply never happens, and then you've been had. Or there's the IP protection fraud. So you might be wary of someone selling directory space, but what about something that seems to come from a more official source? So fraudulent patent office invoices do the rounds. In fact, they're so notorious, the government has even published an official warning. The invoice look nearly identical to the real ones. The only trouble is that the bank account details are different. Or what about an official looking renewal reminder letter or invoice from a company offering its services to help you protect your intellectual property? Again, it's something the government has warned businesses about, so common is that fraud. But what can you do to protect yourself against invoice fraud? Well, as you will have realised by now, invoice fraud is more common than you think. While you may have spotted one of the cruder fake invoice attempts in the past, could you be so certain that with something more sophisticated? So I'll take you through a few top tips now that will give you some minimising the chances of being taken in by an invoice fraudster. So the first point I would say is train your staff. It's all too easy to think that picking up problems is someone else's job, but when it comes to invoice fraud, it's something everyone needs to think about. Brief your receptionist to be on the alert, have reminders on staff notice boards or in your updates bulletins. The next point is check your invoices. Compile a list of companies your business regularly purchases from and raise a red flag whenever you get anything from anywhere else or whenever bank details differ. Cut out manual steps that are prone to human error. That is something that technology can help with. Make sure employees are being vigilant when they pass an invoice of payment. Did they actually see the directory listing? Did the printer cartridges definitely arrive? Double check payment details such as the bank account number with previous invoices to weed out any false invoices. Confirm purchase order numbers to match actual orders with invoices from legitimate suppliers. This can help avoid issues with duplicate invoices and any potential suspicious invoices. The last point here is reporting the crime. So If you do spot a scam, alert the necessary authorities. In the UK, you should report invoice fraud to Action Fraud, who are the UK's National Fraud and Cybercrime Reporting Centre. It's easy to do online at actionfraud.police.uk. If the fraudulent invoice arrives in the post, the government advises you to keep both the invoice and accompanying envelope in a plastic sleeve and handle it as little as possible to help the authorities take further actions when they can. And then finally, just don't be caught out. As I've said, invoice fraud is a growing problem. Don't be a victim. Be aware of it and have the necessary measures in place to help ensure you're able to spot it and not fall for it. Prevent invoice fraud by improving accounts payable processes and following some of the simple steps I've just highlighted. So I've talked about the problem fraud can cause, but you may be wondering what the solution is. Well, automating spend tracking and management can help you reduce risk and gain greater peace of mind. Automation prevents costly mistakes, audit invoices efficiently, and puts payment controls in place to improve compliance. Implementing an automated invoice solution is a simple way to stay in control of company spend, allowing you to focus on the things that are most important to your organization. A little quote from one of our customers after implementing our invoice solution is they said, "When preparing for an audit, you have full confidence that you'll find the documents that you need, so there's no more egg on my face when dealing with auditors." Automation not only reduces risk, but also saves you money along the way. Fraud and non-compliance can have a significant monetary cost to your business. Automation helps save money in a variety of ways, including fraud prevention, non-qualified reimbursement prevention, and tax preparedness. So you've seen in the last couple of slides, and there's some interesting stats and numbers around the results automation can bring. So it really is worth thinking about whether your business is ready to make that change. The good news is there is a better way. Every business needs to manage and control its spending and budgets, but this is increasingly difficult because, as we've said, the way businesses buy is changing, the number of vendors you work with is likely growing, and the role employees play in those purchases is evolving as well. And that's why our travel, expense, and invoice solutions are one integrated solution. SAP Concur consolidates your spending data from your systems and your hotel, airline, and other suppliers into a single connected process for managing your spending. So with our platform, you're able to provide more global flight and hotel vendor choices to your travelers by integrating data from GDS and TMC partners, as well as travel suppliers. You can ensure compliance with your travel and spending policies, fulfill your duty of care obligations by having an easy way to determine where your employees are and when there's a disaster or emergency. Crucially, you can track and manage spending down to the last dime by integrating data from corporate credit card providers and receipts directly from key suppliers, so you can pull in and classify individual charges. And also you can reduce weeks of invoice wrangling to a few days of automated online processing by automatically capturing and routing invoices from multiple sources and then managing approvals. Having an integrated solution can have a huge impact on your bottom line. So SAP Concur Invoice eliminates piles of paperwork, drastically reduces processing time. And because it can integrate into invoices with travel and expense payments in a single system, provides complete view to monitor and manage all your business spending. The invoice solution allows you to capture and automate paper and electronic invoices and integrate those payments into a single system for managing all of your spending. You'll literally be able to track every penny in one simple AP system and access it anytime, anywhere with the SAP Concur mobile app. So the first point here is automating all of your accounts payable. So you get a full solution for total AP automation with all our solutions. You'll put an end to disconnected transactions and get a holistic view of all of your spend. You can effectively time your invoice payments. So when you've got greater visibility, it's easier to track and control when you make payments, or even capture early payment discounts for you to more effectively utilize your cash on hand. Capture invoices electronically. So capturing e-invoices or using OCR technology to turn paper invoices into electronic files. So you can trim staff time spent processing and reduce the risk of errors and double payment. Triple check for accuracy. So SAP Concur three-way match automates the intensive and error-prone process of matching invoices. POs and goods received. Everything you pay for is automatically verified against everything you receive, and mismatched figures, errors and exceptions are flagged before payments go out the door. You can track attendee spending. So with our attendee tracking, you can see the complete spend for each individual at an event or meeting across both expense reports and invoices. Connected with the tools you know. So crucially with a lot of you, our invoice solution integrates seamlessly with GP and Dynamics, along with other partners and vendors. And with one-click syncing eliminates your need to export or import files or enter data manually. And the final point there is simplify the process and automate approvals. So when employees request purchases, they're quickly validated against your purchasing policies and routed for approval, which means managers can do from SAP Concur mobile app. You can even set up workflow options for several levels of approval, plus complex coding and allocations across departments. So I just wanted to quickly touch on a customer case study of ours. Devon Air Ambulance, as some of you may know, is a local charity with ambition. It owns and operates 2 helicopters and has expanded operations into the hours of darkness, so supporting the community of Devon during trauma and medical emergencies. As one of the most well-established air ambulances in the country, it prides itself on professionalism and innovation that ultimately help save lives. It actually costs £5.5 million a year to keep services flying, raised through donations, an in-house lottery, fundraising, and 18 charity shops. So spending the funds raised wisely is crucial to this ongoing success. The charity saw an opportunity to improve effectiveness by moving away from manual finance processes in line with the organisation's overall efficiency goals. To increase visibility of goods and services ordered across the charity, it operated a purchase order system. But these were handwritten on triplicate forms, which presented a number of challenges. There was a risk of POs being incomplete, incorrect, or needing to be physically retrieved. As the process was paper-based, it was time-consuming to ensure the correct authorities were obtained ahead of purchase and then payment. All this didn't help the finance team get a clear view of spend. So according to David Hawes, their finance director, they can now instantly pull up an invoice, cross-reference against a PO, check bank details, search historical payments, and reduce that risk of error. The rise of online fraud was also proving a real threat. And David said, in an environment where we're seeing more cybercrime targeted at the charity sector, it's important our controls are extremely strong and we're protecting the money our donors give us for the benefit of our patients. Invoice phishing in particular is becoming more sophisticated, and David described how they've seen invoices appear to come from people within their own charity despite increasingly difficult and stringent filters. They needed an automated system that could help them enforce standard and consistent controls, minimizing the risk of cyber fraud and error. And David was tasked with streamlining finance processes and investigating viable alternatives, moving away from paper POs and invoices that were causing payment delays and risk was the first priority. An automated online system was a natural choice, offering a faster process with checks and balances in place, making it easier to validate invoice at any stage. Concur Invoice was selected on the strength of its offering and the team's proactive approach. And David also said, SAP Concur had everything we needed and there wasn't an equivalent service at the equivalent price. David explains how the invoice process has since turned around. So he said, we can instantly pull up an invoice, cross-reference against the PO, check balance, bank details, search historical payments, and reduce that risk of error. So in summary then, whenever people are involved, mistakes can happen. If you're reliant on paper to manage vital finance processes, the door opens to errors. Look for steps in the process where you can remove the risk of human error, such as data rekeying or even lost paper. The lack of checks and balances in many manual finance processes makes them a natural target for fraud from both internal and external sources. Maybe ask yourself, how might your processes be exploited, or are you at risk? When it comes to invoices, fraud can be rife. In fact, scammers are finding more sophisticated ways to get you to pay up. HMRC and Action Fraud warn of fake invoices for things like directory listings and patents, which appear legitimate but don't even exist. Invoices might state that the due date for payment has passed, or threaten that non-payment will affect your credit when you might not even have ordered the goods or services. Again, ask yourself, can your spreadsheet pick these threats up? Gaps in invoice processes, along with a lack of adequate detection capabilities, are the main areas of fraud weaknesses for many businesses. Moving to more intelligent online tools can help you stop and spot unscrupulous behavior. An automated invoice system can flag vendors who aren't recognized or invoices that don't match up to purchase requests, giving you increased visibility and protection against fraud. The key is to create more transparent processes, connecting the dots across the business and putting early warning systems in place. Putting in place automated processes significantly increases spending visibility across your business. So if you take it a step further by aggregating data from multiple sources to get that full picture, then you'll be able to analyze meaningful data, spot trends, and take decisive actions. With manual processes, valuable decision-making data is locked in silos and spreadsheets and even on loose paper. Making sense of it, let alone analyzing it, and spotting trends is increasingly time-consuming and tricky. Being able to integrate spend reporting from across the business and view this data visually drives incredibly powerful insight. Thanks very much for listening. Well, obviously now we've got time for questions, but I'll hand back to Steve if you wanted to take care of that.
Perfect, great. Thank you, Robert. I found that really interesting. If anyone's got any questions, please submit them. But if you do want to know more, get in touch with the account manager. But also Rob will be with us on Thursday, 23rd of May, so this month, for our GP customer event in London. There's still time to register and join us for that. So if any other questions that come through, I think what we'll do is we'll respond to them actually offline, if that's okay. Please keep a look into your inboxes the next few days. Will be a link to today's session of the recording, so you can pass that on or review for another time. Once the webinar is actually closed, there'll also be a survey that basically gives you a chance to leave some more feedback, whether or not you're interested for more information or how you found the webinar, and whether or not there's other topics that you'd be interested in future webinars as well. So I appreciate if you take some time to actually put that through. So that concludes today's session. Thank you again, Rob, and thanks everyone for joining us. Have a great day.
Thanks very much.